We have talked about for weeks how overloaded the Cleveland Guardians roster is. The 40-man has no room to go. There is no way you can add another player to this roster. Guardians said, hold my beer. They added another pitcher. We'll talk about him. We'll preview the Red Series, all on today's episode of Locked On Guardians.
You are Locked On Guardians, your daily podcast on the Cleveland Guardians, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, my name is Jeff Ellis. My co-host's name, who's hanging out today, is Nacho, 15-year-old cat. He occasionally has a lot to say during the podcast. I want to thank you for making Locked On Guardians your first listen today and every day, wherever it is that you get podcasts. And remind everyone to download daily, subscribe on the YouTube, all that fun stuff. We fell out of the top 100, so I always like to remind the fans to go ahead, download daily. That is something that just really helps the show. For those who don't know me, before I was the host of Locked On Guardians, and concurrently for a little bit, I was the national draft and prospect analyst at 24/7 and scout before that. Before that, I appeared on pretty much every single Cleveland sports blog in some way, shape, or form, discussing prospects in the draft. Without further ado, let's talk about Yohan Ramirez. It was... to see the announced trade, I mean, I got it a little bit before it broke. It was a bit of a surprise. And for those who missed it, he's traded to Cleveland in exchange, basically, I think, cash considerations. The original message I saw, or a player to be named later, but everywhere else just said cash. Yohan Ramirez is not a Guardians type of pitcher. And I'm going to put it that way, because what we saw in last year's draft and what we've seen with this whole team is the thing they do best is finding another gear with pitchers, not refining them. You look at Savale, you look at this entire rotation. Every single pitcher in there found another gear, found a way to improve their pitches. None of them became better pitchers. Like the one really big success story I can think of in terms of someone who had some wildness, I guess there's two. It's Bauer and Clevenger, and how much of that was just those two with their closeness and working together in their own different approaches. But for the most part, they've drafted some guys who have control issues, and they never seem to iron it out. They've not done as well with control pitchers. What they excel with is taking someone who already knows how to pitch and finding that extra gear, and that's why they drafted the players that they did. As Ramirez was a former Rule 5 pick from Houston to Seattle. He had a strong 2021 season and limited opportunities. It was, 27 innings. I don't know if strong's the word. On paper, it looked decent, but he's got a negative WAR for his career across all of his stops. He's got command problems. When he gets hit hard. It's plus stuff, but he's got terrible command. And he's got terrible control. Command and control are different things. Not only does he walk a lot of guys, but he ends up leaving the ball in places where, in spite of, having multiple plus pitches, it gets hammered. If the Guardians could unlock him, which, again, they have done with other players. Right now, he's mostly been slider, fastball, but his curveball was a legitimate weapon in the minors. He was a potential starter at one point in time. I don't think he's going to be that for the Guardians. You're looking at a guy who maybe, again, it's not their fort, but that doesn't mean they can't do it. It doesn't mean that they don't see something maybe that's easily correctable. But they get a pitcher who's got plus stuff. 3 above average to plus pitches with the fastball, slider, and curve. Just can't spot any of them. And he doesn't know where it's going. If we are being nice, everything gets away from him. I mean, throughout his minor league career, his walks per 9 have been, in a good season over 4, most seasons over 6. He's just with the home run rates over 2 in Seattle, a pitcher-friendly park. So, yeah, he's not been good. Like, there's no other way around it. This is about tools and not production. He hasn't been able to produce consistently because he walks himself and he gives up long balls. And we know the Guardians don't necessarily care about that. They don't care about giving up a lot of home runs as long as you can keep guys off the base pads. And he does not give up a lot of hits, but the walks are there, and they come back to haunt him. And you look at his FIPS, I mean, they've been terrible, which is fielding independent ERA. It's the best indicator of future success. They all show that this is a guy who's not good. There's no other way around it. He has had 3 seasons in the bigs. He has not been good in any of those 3 seasons. He is 27 years of age, and Seattle's like, it's not going to come together. We're giving up. And the Guardians were like, we can move James Karinchak to the 40-man, the 60-day disabled list. So to open a spot, they moved Karinchak. I mean, he has been, you wonder what's going on. Like, what is the, we know the official injury report. Is this some degree of mental? How do you qualify what is going on with him? I mean, he pitched 6 innings after he got sent down. And that's all he's thrown. We're 6 innings over the last 3 months of the year once he ended up in AAA. Hasn't really gone out and shown anything since then, and has been dealing with the injuries and the ineffectiveness, and he was never the same player after they banned sticky substances. And that was the thing we talked about. He is that guy who throughout his minor league career had good stuff, but elevated to, one of the top relievers in baseball, and certainly seemed to be due to foreign substances. Now, there's more going on there. I don't know exactly how they're putting him on the 60-day DL. He seemed to be trying to work his way back, but now, I mean, he may not pitch for them this year. And when you look at the back end of the pen, his role is now Trevor Steffens and Sam Hench's. Like, those 2 guys have taken Karinchak's role. I mean, if he could come back and be what he was before, if he could figure that out, and that's a deadly bullpen. I just don't have much faith in that happening, and right now I have no idea what is going on with him. He's pitched 9 innings, over, 9 calendar months? Now, yeah, some of that's the offseason, but he also didn't pitch during the end of last season. He hasn't pitched in the minors so far this year. They moved him over because they don't think he's going to be ready anytime soon. When you're putting him on the 60-day disabled list, that just shows that he has a right back strain, is the official injury report. We'll have to, see when he's healthy and ready to go. But, I mean, to me, that's a right back strain for the 60-day disabled list. I mean, I guess you can probably backdate it because he hasn't pitched at all this year. But yikes for Karinchak. And then Ramirez, again, you never really want to doubt him. They're going to send him down to AAA. I'm sure they're going to get coaches going and working with him. But at the same time with Ramirez, he comes from originally Houston. If you're going to talk about the teams who do the best job of developing pitching, it's Cleveland, Tampa, Houston, and Milwaukee. And the Dodgers. That's probably your top 5. You can argue order, but that's definitely the top 5. You're betting on finding something Houston didn't, which, of late, Houston's been better than Cleveland with pitching development. They have been. That's just the truth of the matter. So I don't have a ton of faith in him getting figured out, but I guess at the same time, what you're doing here is exactly what you did when you traded. I'm almost surprised this trade didn't happen a while ago. Like this, Ramirez for Bradley Zimmer would have made sense a while ago. I'm kind of shocked it didn't occur, but this is the same thing like Anthony Castro. It's a player that has options, who can go up and down, who is an interesting arm, who they're going to get an extended chance to look at. If it works out, great. If it doesn't, fine. They did a small trade last year when they traded Jake Bauers and got Dominic Casetta Stubbs, who's a potential reliever down the line for the Guardians. But that's another quick little deal, an interesting arm, and then, probably even more so than getting someone with, plus stuff, but no, they got a thrower. They didn't get a pitcher today. They got a thrower. Is the fact that Karinchak's going on the 60-day disabled list with a right back strain. That's, the injuries kept evolving and changing with him, and I'm going to be curious to see if and when he does pitch this year. We're going to take our first break. We're going to come back, talk about a big promotion in the minors, And, of course, we're going to preview this upcoming short series against the Cincinnati Reds. Ohio Cup. It could still be a tie at this point, right? Our first sponsor is, as you know, my favorite. Listen, they sent all of us hosts the birthday cake puffs. And the reason why they sent it to everyone is they knew it's a winner. They know it's a favorite. Who doesn't like birthday cake? Who doesn't like funfetti cake? This is funfetti cake in a bar, and I've talked about it. Maybe I need to explain in depth what a puff is. I love their puffs. The churro puff, one of my favorites. That you can still get that. That's still available. I talked about the one that was like a peep. They're chirps. This is a protein bar that is a marshmallow wrapped in chocolate that has, less sugars than most other protein bars and 19 grams of protein. It looks like a candy bar, but it gets an A in my health food app. And sometimes, in a health food app, you'll say, I eat 2 of these, and then it drops the score down because it's not as good. You should only have one. Stays an A. Like, this is just a healthy item that you can eat every day. Over at BuiltBar.com, I eat them every day. You can eat them every day if you go to BuiltBar.com. Remember to use the promo code LOCK15. I use that on all of my orders because it is the best deal you will find on the internet when it comes to Built Bar. That is promo code LOCK15 to try the best tasting protein bar I have ever had. BuiltBar.com, promo code LOCKed15. So now we've talked about that trade, let's talk about the fact that it sounds like Tanner Burns is going to be down for a while. So we talked about just how amazing that Akron RubberDucks pitching staff is, right? We had Hunter Gaddis on the show 2 weeks ago. Espino is currently hurt, but he's also part of that great rotation there. Then I'm trying to think who else was involved. Logan Allen, we talked about him, the young player. The young lefty who's always been someone who I've been higher on in the field. I thought he was the best player they drafted in their 2020 draft class. In addition, I'm just trying to remember, top of my head. So, we talked Gaddis, Burns, who's on the DL, Espino, who's on the DL. Espino hopefully will come off soon. Talked about, I'm just falling over myself. 2 injured guys, Gaddis, Allen, Joey Cantillo, who I thought was the number 2 piece back in the day, in the Clevenger trade. And now I know I'm forgetting people because it's just ridiculous the amount of starters who have gone through. But when you look at it, they just called up Gavin Williams, who has been absolutely unhittable in the lower mine. Oh, who I forgot was Xavier Curry, who's likely to get added to the roster before the end of the year, probably as a reliever. But yeah, they have, and all of these guys are pitching prospects. That's the thing. Every single one of these players we're talking about is a legitimate pitching prospect for the Cleveland Guardians. But Gavin Williams, it's a cleaner delivery than Espino's. Espino is a unicorn. Maybe he'll stay healthy, but this is okay. So for good or bad, this is very reminiscent of Tristan McKenzie in AA, where there are always concerns because Tristan McKenzie is also a unicorn. His height to weight ratio doesn't exist as a starter. I've talked about many times. I tweeted out that, going back when I was paying for Baseball Reference to have the ability to search the database, I tried to find someone with his listed height and weight. And the only picture that popped up was Jason Schmidt. And I didn't tag him in this. I just tweeted out that fact. And Jason Schmidt found me, responded to that tweet, and said, that was my high school weight. I pitched at this weight. That stuff is never updated. I was like, oh, well, I didn't tag you, but thank you for the information. So, McKenzie was a unicorn. He moved through the system steadily and didn't really add much. He was kind of the similar guy, just refinement, and throughout, improved the secondary offerings. Now, and then he had the back injury and then the other injury, and it just kind of slowed him down in AA. This is Espino's first time with those injuries. And, the bigger thing with him is honestly, he doesn't have to be Rule 5 added, so he's not going to be. We're not going to see him in Cleveland this year. This injury, there was hope that he might come back this week. That hasn't happened yet. I think there will be people by the end of this year who have Gavin Williams ranked ahead of Daniel Espino because there's always going to be that degree of risk. Espino, like I said, is a complete unicorn. How much you want to depend on his future outcomes, like I said, they could be top end. Williams was drafted last July, and he's in Double-A. They have been crazy aggressive. This is a team they used to be. When I started covering this team back in like 2007, back in the days when Chuck Lofgren was the number 2 prospect, Adam Miller was number 1, and it was nothing after them. I mean, those were low days for the system. I don't want to sit here and drag anyone, but I can think of like no power first baseman who ended up, I don't even think, playing in the big leagues, who were considered top 5 prospects. It was dark days in this system. And I say all this to be like, they would bring these guys up just level by level. You spend a year in low A, you spend a year in Double-A, you spend a year in high. I know I skipped high A, but it'd be this slow step. Now they're like, you haven't even. It's not even a year since you were drafted. Let's put you in Double-A, Gavin Williams. It's like, okay, and we're off and running. I mean, he's got electric stuff. He's got the pitches. He's got the velocity. I can see why. I was probably too low on him. And he was one of those players, like, I kept moving up in my draft rankings a year ago and kept moving up. And when they drafted him, it was a slight overdraft, but I was fine with it. Like, I did have some guys I liked more. And when I did my redraft, I don't believe I took him, and I'll probably end up looking foolish for it. Sometimes we get him right, like, when I redrafted Sean Murphy over Logan Ice. But then others, like that one, probably going to end up looking very wrong. But to aggressively put him in Double-A already, now this is what it comes down to. Batenfield, Curry, Gaddis all have to be added at the end of the season if you want to keep them. Cantillo. That's 4 potential arms. Those players are all going to get shots. Logan Allen, Daniel Espino, and Gavin Williams are all playing very well. But none of them need to be added to the 40-man at the end of the year. And yes, there are those guys now like Castro and Ramirez where you're like, well, that's kind of like some dead weight. But at the same time, at some point, they're going to have to re-add, Cody Morris. You're going to have to re-add Carlos Vargas. You're going to have to re-add Karinchak. So that's 3 players that, technically they're not on the 40-man, but before any final roster moves get made, you have to add them. And it's not like this is a team loaded with veteran free agents. So Brian Shaw is the only player who's probably going to be gone at the end of this year in terms of just contract on a 1-year deal. I guess technically that's not true. Maley and Hedges would also walk at the end of the year with the way things are set up. But it's not like they're going to clear a ton of space. So it is a situation where I can't see them adding any of these players that they don't need to add. They'll let them sit there and work on their refinement and get better. This is not a team building for this year. Let's be honest. The window, as much as I talked about on the Friday show, it's like I still would love to see Contreras and Happ. And I'm totally okay with 1 year of Contreras buying you time for some of the other players to get ready. Hopefully Lavastilla or Naylor. But in Happ would be a 2-year guy. But you're not building for this year anyways. They're not going to rush. They're not going to mess with service time. They're not going to put themselves in an even greater bind in terms of this roster by adding someone. So it's great that Gavin Williams is promoted. But I mean, he's going to spend the rest of the year at Double-A, and then he'll probably spend all of next year in Triple-A. I don't see him getting a call-up in the next year and a half, unless they make some big moves, unless they clear some space on this 40-man, unless they trade some of this starting pitching. The problem is, what are you going to trade him for? Who right now really has value? That whole pitching staff is down. Unless you're trading McKenzie, and you wouldn't trade him. He's the cheapest player, the one who's farthest away from arbitration. What are you going to get for Savali right now? Not much. What are you going to get for Plesac? He's a back end. I mean, really, what do you get for someone like him now? These players don't carry much trade value. You're hoping Shane Bieber rebounds because he's likely traded this offseason. But then if you trade him, what are you going to get in return? Like, how do you make that work where you're not just taking that whole 40-man crunch and making it even worse? So, all things to consider. I'm very curious to see, but like I said, Gavin Williams is going to be a top 5 prospect, if not top 3 prospect in this system by the end of the year. I fully believe that. A good chance you'll see Williams and Espino 1-2 in some order, and probably with Valera. Though Valera's, it's not been a great start to his year, and for a guy who can't stay healthy, it's not like he is, gone out there and shown the world that now he's an Iron Man. If you've kind of missed it so far with him, like I said, he was my number one player heading into this season. Akron, 222 average, 371 on base, 340 slugging, 711 OPS in 30 games. I mean, he's not playing super well. He is not doing anything to make you think that he's going to do anything other than spend this entire year in Akron. So we'll have to see. Something to consider and talk about. But at the same time, he had a 747 OPS last year there. He struggled with that transition, and his numbers are somewhat in line with the year ago. So let's take a break, come back, and talk about the Reds and Guardians upcoming series. Now we talked a little bit about the minors in the middle. We had a trade. Talked about the ridiculousness of the Akron pitching staff and Gavin Williams being pushed up there. Gavin Williams is probably... See, I know it's going to go to break. Daniel Espino is the highest upside. Like, when his stuff is going, he's unhittable. He's, potentially leads the league in strikeouts type. Gavin Williams is the best combo of high ceiling, low floor amongst those kind of top-tier pitching prospects in system. And then the safest is Logan Allen. So that's how I kind of view, to me, those are the top three arms in system right now. Agree, disagree, you can hit me up on Twitter at JeffMLBDraft. We're going to take that break, come back, and talk about the 2-game series against the Reds. This episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing number of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Why endure often pointless or seemingly intimidating questions? Is your Odyssey an LX or an EX? And wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, choosing only their brands their warehouse happens to carry. You have a computer with access to Rock Auto at home and in your pocket. Let's not bring it up every time. I cost myself $50 by getting my oil change and letting them just give me whatever wipers they had. I just accepted the ones. If I had gone to Rock Auto, because when you go there, it gives you a little flame icon to let you know which ones are the best sellers. So you know what people are buying. So you don't necessarily, I could have gone with the super cheap ones there and saved even more money, but I could have still saved $50 if I just gone to Rock Auto and not been lazy. Don't be like me. Don't be lazy. Save yourself some money. Go to rockauto.com. And again, even if you're a person like me and you don't know cars, you can do a quick YouTube video and save yourself money on filters, save yourself so much money on windshield wipers. And by the way, they often have rebates on filters as well. And when you go to rockauto.com, in the little box, how'd you hear about us, make sure you write some form of locked on. Locked On Podcast, Locked On MLB, Locked On Guardians, something to let them know their advertising money was well spent with the Locked On Network and rockauto.com. Okay, so the Reds, they're bad. Newsflash. They're the worst team in baseball right now. They have not got to double digits in wins yet after they were at 9 wins and then they had a no-hitter and lost. They have never had the top pick in the draft. I've talked about this many a time. They're in line for the top pick in next year's draft. I was trying to think, probably the Dylan Cruz draft is what we're shaping that up to be, the LSU outfielder who, by the way, if you go back to my 2020 way too early mock, I had him ranked higher than Austin Hendricks. I had him ranked higher than Robert Hassel. I had him the number 1 prep outfielder in that class. Now, I knew he was undersized. I knew he was not necessarily the best athlete, but the dude had a really good approach. He worked all fields, and he hit the ball hard. I was like, what doesn't he do? It's like, what doesn't this guy do? He kind of fell in the ranks everywhere else and ended up going to college. He's been a force since day one at LSU. So right now, the Reds are the leaders in the clubhouse in the Dylan Cruz sweepstakes. Let's do our comparison. Let's just go position by position. Catcher, Tyler Stevenson obviously wins. He's one of the best young catchers in baseball. It took him a while. He was drafted in 2015. This is really his first year in 2022 as a starter. There were years where people kind of gave up on him, myself included. It was not a straight path. It was not an easy path for him to get to the big leagues. He was the 11th overall pick. He was a bit of a Kylie McDaniel find. He was a Georgia kid. Kylie was posting some videos. He was a late player in that season, but he hit big power. He was a really interesting late riser in that 2015 class. One of the few times the Reds have not picked in the top 10 over the last 10 years. But it's turned into a very successful pick. And again, I don't think they're trading him. I know a lot of Guardians fans like him because you get so many years of control. But why would they trade him? if you're going to build a team out for the future, he's who you build around. You're building with him and Jonathan India and Hunter Green, because the rest of the minors, I don't know. I wasn't a Lodolo guy. De La Cruz, Brandon Williamson is a solid prospect, but he's not great. I liked their draft class from a year ago. Matt McLean was a really nice pickup, but it's a weak minors. It's a weak majors. It's a weak everything in Cincinnati. Moving to first base, Colin Moran has actually played well for them. He of the 40 different stops. If you might remember, speaking of draft classes, he was the guy that was most mocked to the Guardians in the 2013 draft? It was the Clint Frazier draft. Everyone mocked him as the Guardians pick. Right now, slotted at first base for the Guardians, I believe, is Owen Miller. Until we know more about the Josh Naylor situation, when he's going to come back, Owen Miller and Colin Moran. I'm gonna go Miller here. Moran just hasn't been very good. There's a reason why he's gone Pittsburgh and Miami and was let go and is now in Cincinnati. Moving on to second base, Matt Reynolds. First time I saw his name on the Reds is Mark Reynolds. No, Matt Reynolds. Different M. Reynolds. This is advantage Cleveland. Andres Jimenez is probably going to be the second baseman. I know. It stinks. Just let the dude play short. Why can Rosario not play second base? He can't play short. He can't. He's not good there. He's not good anywhere defensively. And his bat hasn't, it's one of those situations everyone's like, okay, what can we get for him? Right now, who wants him? You can't trade someone who's performing that poorly. It's what skill does he bring? So, advantage Guardians. Moving to shortstop, Kyle Farmer versus Ahmed Rosario. Man, this is a race to the bottom situation right here. Kyle Farmer has been a quad A player for his career. He has been worse than Rosario. His defensive metrics aren't good. This is advantage Cleveland because is it a Jose Barrio, I believe, is their top prospect for Cincy, who I think is hurt, and that's why he's not. Yeah, so right now, probably COVID list for Votto. India had a strained hamstring. Barrio's got had hamate surgery. Donovan Solano, I liked that addition for them in free agency, and he was playing well. Strained hamstring. Max Schrock, strained calf. Jake Fraley, who was the third piece in the Winker deal, he has knee inflammation, and Nick Senzel, COVID list. So, man, go check out Senzel. I've talked about it a lot of times. It's not coming together for him. And if you think that's a few guys on the injured list, Justin Dunn, strained shoulder, 60-day. Lodolo, strained lower back. Mike Minor, shoulder soreness. I still don't know why they traded for Mike Minor. I get that Amir Garrett had a down year, but there wasn't a better offer. TJ Anton, who's another depth guy, a solid piece for them, had Tommy John, Daniel Duarte, elbow inflammation. Lucas Sims, who I think a lot of us thought would be their closer, lower back spasms, and Justin Wilson, who's bounced around a bit, elbow soreness. This is one of the more beat up squads. Nick Senzel, by the way, this year runs created plus of 46. This is a guy who is now across his big league career. You're looking at 180 games, 673 plate appearances, 77 runs created plus. Top 5 prospect in all of baseball. Has not posted a positive WAR since 2019. I say this where I had him as the number 2 player in the draft, gave Cincinnati massive kudos for drafting him. I don't know what's occurred. It was 70 hit, 55 everywhere. That was a uniform view. I don't know if it's because they keep trying to play him out of position in center field. Just maybe let him settle in at something else. But my goodness, it makes you feel like there's no such thing as a prospect sometimes. Continuing our, trip across the infield, third base, advantage Guardians. Brandon Drury is actually playing well for them, but that is still advantage Guardians. That gives Cleveland, a 3-spot advantage moving to the outfield. Center fielder, TJ Freidel. He was an interesting guy because he's one of those, the Reds had extra bonus money left, and he was kind of a forgotten player, went undrafted, and they signed him. they still had some money left, so they were able to sign him to a contract late in the season as an undrafted player. Points where I liked him more than others. Advantage center field goes to Cleveland, though. 4-point advantage. Let's move to the corners. Left field. Tommy Pham's been playing really well of late. Cleveland currently, the left field position. Why can I not see who has had the most games in left? It's because they're listing Mercado and Kwan. So Kwan's got 3 games there and 3 games in right. So I guess we're going to technically go with Kwan in left field for now. I'm going to say advantage Cincinnati. Just because I know people are getting mad. Kwan is a better defender, yes. Right now, Tommy Pham is murdering baseballs. He is playing really well coming into this series. He is defensively has issues. Kwan is the other side, where his defense is there, but his offense is backed up. So right now, in this moment, these 2 games, who is likely to perform better? It's Tommy Pham. Over the course of the season, it still might be Tommy Pham. Over the course of the next 2 years, it's Steven Kwan. This is not to say that I'm out on Kwan. This is not to bury the kid. It's just to say that right now, Pham is playing really well, probably better than you think. Moving to right field, old friend alert, Tyler Naquin versus Oscar Mercado. That's advantage Cincy. So they take 2 of those outfield spots. So Cleveland ends up essentially shortstop, second base up 2 positions, moving to DH. Moustakas has not been very good this year. Franmil has been back and forth, up and down. I think it's still advantage Cleveland. If I go and look at Moustakas' overall numbers, I feel like he has not played super well. 110 runs created plus. Well, I guess we got to shift it. Advantage. For some reason, I thought he wasn't even playing that well. Advantage Cincy. So 1-point advantage, and then you move into something like starting rotation. Connor Overton, a free agent released by a bunch of teams. Hunter Green, Luis Castillo, Tyler Mahle are maybe more name value than production value. Not to say that those aren't really good pitchers. The bullpen is not good at all on any level. That's definitely advantage Cleveland. Old friend alerts like Ross Detweiler. And then Jeff Hoffman, another one of those, big name prospects that didn't ever quite come together. Tony Santillan, I thought was going to be a future starter for the Reds, is a big prospect for them. We'll have to see how it plays out. But right now, the pen and the rotation is advantage Cleveland. Individual matchups, Plesac versus Overton, that's advantage Cleveland. Mahle versus Quantrell, with the way things have played out so far this year. I still think that is advantage Cleveland. My co-host is strongly disagreeing with that. He thinks that Mahle is the better pitching matchup. I guess his FIP is a 3.46. Okay, you're right. It's advantage Cincinnati in that one. Are you okay? You made me doubt myself. He's right. It is probably advantage Cincy in the Tyler Mahle, Cal Quantrell pitching matchup. But overall, these are 2 games Cleveland should win. Cleveland should sweep this series, since he is a really bad team. If Cleveland doesn't end these 2 games with an 18-17 record, then they played poorly. You can't give up either one of these. Then there's off day Thursday, and then we'll preview Detroit, another team that is massively scuffling out of the gate before facing... Excuse me, sorry. I don't have a cough button. Before facing the Houston Astros in Houston, one of the hottest teams in baseball. I've been Jeff Ellis. This has been Locked On Guardians podcast for this week. Remember to rate and review, download daily. It helps. Also subscribe and check out the YouTube where you can see babies and cats. And when we're playing games again, I'm going to start going back to having, an inning maybe every other day or something like that as a segment on the show. People really liked me doing my version of color commentary and talking over the game. So I will try to do more of those. And as always, hit me up on the Twitter, hit me up in the comments on the YouTube. I respond. I adjust this show based on what people are telling me. So that is there for you. And as I end every show now, go Guardians, go.